Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever dreamed big in life, whether that's starting your own business, moving to a foreign land, landing that dream job, or anything else, then do we have the Think Big show for you. Today I'll be talking with Michael Port, former professional actor. You may have seen him in Sex and the City, Law and Order, The Pelican Brief, or Down to Earth. He's a New York Times best-selling author, keynote speaker, and CEO coach. And he's the author of an amazing book, Steal the Show, and my new all-time favorite keynote address and inspirational speech, The Think Big Revolution. Today we'll talk about how to dream big, stand tall, find your voice, and how to guarantee a standing ovation for all the performances of your life. That plus we'll talk about why you don't want to be the devil's advocate, what in the world Marlon Brando has to do with cotton balls, and why deep-fried car tires might just be the greatest food in the world.
That was the best close to an introduction that I've ever heard. Nicely done.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. Welcome to the show. Are you ready to shine?
Always.
Woohoo! So I've got to ask, although we did discuss it briefly off air, are you still road biking?
I'm not so much. It's my bike. Now when I bring it in for a tune-up, or at least one time when I did, the guy at the bike shop goes, "Oh, classic."
Oh, no.
This was, I've got a titanium Lightspeed from...
Oh, I know him well.
From 20 years ago. And I'm like, what do you mean a classic? This is a hot bike. He's like, dude, look around. Look what they're making now. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I'm getting pretty old.
But it's still cool, and titanium will never go out of style.
Exactly.
So from there, real briefly, can you tell us, how did you end up as a professional actor, and why did you decide to leave?
Well, I started acting when I was in college. I actually took one of those introductory to acting classes because you had to take one of those fine arts courses. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But I was already in my second semester of my sophomore year. And I didn't really think there was much to do with acting. I just thought it was a fun class. The teacher said, why don't you do a little bit more? I said, all right, I'll audition for a show. So I auditioned for The Grapes of Wrath. Mm-hmm. It was a 50-person cast in a 1,000-seat theater. And I got the part of Tom Joad. I said, I don't know how to act. He's like, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. I was like, okay. I think it was in part because I looked like a 30-year-old man when I was 18. I just looked old. And it was the most extraordinary experience of my life. And my father came up to me afterwards. My father's a psychiatrist, and I had been majoring in psychology. And he said, Michael, I think this is what you should do with your life. I said, really? Why? He said, well, given your personality and your natural talents, I think you'll learn more about people doing this than you will studying psychology. I said, okay. And that's when I started applying to grad school because I wanted to really train. And I went to the grad acting program at NYU. I got a master's in acting. And then I went out and worked professionally after that.
And I'm guessing, I'm thinking about a near and dear friend of ours who's told us, and he's actually taught the method in Norway, just how much you must have learned about other people while honing this craft.
Well, isn't that what you do as a performer? You study the way people think, you study the way they behave, you do everything in your power to step into their shoes. People often ask what our particular style was. They say, were you method actors? Were you? And when I was in grad school at NYU, we weren't taught a particular protocol. Mm-hmm. My wife has a master's from Yale in acting, and she wasn't taught a particular protocol. What we were taught, however, is how to be more open. So you work on your instrument, you work on your voice and your speech and your ability to move, but most of your time is focused on being more emotionally available. And gosh, what an extraordinary thing to do for all people, not just for actors. Mm-hmm. And that was some of the best training that I've ever had for most parts of my life, not just for my work in TV and film and theater. And it served me really well over the years, but I left for a couple of reasons. The reason that I said that I left, at least my spiel, was that I wanted to go into business. I was excited about the idea of entrepreneurship. I didn't become an entrepreneur right away, but I liked that idea and was kind of bored with the business, and it was just kind of bullshit. The truth of the matter was, I didn't like getting rejected. And I was getting rejected a lot. And that's part of the process. It's part of the business. And at the time, I didn't have the maturity to handle it. However, that experience in my early 20s positively influenced my way of being when I became an entrepreneur. Now, of course, I felt different because I felt when I was acting and I got rejected that I was getting personally rejected. Now, sometimes that's true, but more often than not, it wasn't. It's just you're not right for that particular role. Sometimes, they cast a woman who's 4'10" and you're just too tall to play opposite her. It would look strange. But most of the time, it's not really about you. So now, as an entrepreneur, I don't worry so much about the rejection that comes along with the process. I just focus on the results that I want to achieve rather than the approval that I might want to get.
This kind of jumps ahead, and I want to go back into your history for a brief minute before we really not lose focus, but jump there. But you had an aha moment that you share in the book, which was fascinating to me, and I think pertains to all of us in life, which is how differently many of the auditions might have gone had you not tried to figure out what they wanted.
Yeah.
Instead gave them the best performance that you could imagine for the role.
Well, look, most people don't go into acting because they don't want approval. Let's just put that on the table.
Yeah.
And when I would go in for an audition, I'd read the script and I'd look at the character and I'd start to think, well, what are they looking for? And the first person that you read for is the casting director. So I would think, what is the casting director looking for? What do they want? Well, then if I got a call back, then often I was reading for the director, and the producer was often there. So I think, what is the director looking for? What does the producer want? And I spent a lot of time focused on that. And what I should have been doing, and I didn't realize this until after I had left, what I should have been doing is focusing on what I could create. Because in large part, the casting director just wants to make sure that they don't get fired. Mm-hmm. Now, I have great respect for casting directors, but often what happens is if the casting director doesn't bring in an actor, or the director doesn't find an actor they want, they often blame the casting director, fire the casting director, bring in another casting director. That casting director just brings in the same actors because there's only a certain amount of actors in New York and LA that are working. And then they find the actor in that next group and they blame the original casting director for not. So they're often I just want to make sure that I'm bringing in people that they'll like. That's what they're worried about. The director, you don't know. The director may be sitting there thinking, well, I really hope this actor doesn't ask me any questions because this is the first $100 million film budget that I've ever been given, and I've only done music videos before, and so I don't really know how to tell an actor what to do. So can this actor just please do what they should be doing on their own? And then the producer is often thinking, say, well, if you're unknown, they say, well, can I cast this unknown? Do I have enough known talent to be able to bank on for the film? So they're thinking about all sorts of things that they need to contend with, but your job is to make strong choices. That is your job. And if you think about entrepreneurship, if you think about relationships, making strong choices tells the world something about who you are. So one chapter in Steal the Show is about choosing early and choosing often. Mm-hmm. So what an actor does, and I think this relates to what we can be doing in our life and our work, is making these choices early so that the choice they make influences the future. So if they make a choice, say, you know what, that choice worked very, very well, I'm going to keep it. Well, that choice didn't work so well, but it led me to another choice. That choice worked better, I'm going to keep that. Oh, or that choice didn't work as well as I hoped, but it led me to another. People who make choices tend to be appealing and attractive. People who don't make choices don't make much happen and are not as interesting to play with. They perseverate. They have trouble making decisions. If you have trouble making decisions, it's hard to build something, to create something.
There's a certain level of confidence that's necessary in there. I'm thinking of now, I joked about it at the beginning, Marlon Brando coming in for The Godfather and saying, I'm going for this. And tell me about the cotton balls.
He put cotton balls in his mouth. We all, anybody who's seen The Godfather will remember that, he does this thing with his mouth, right? I can't do a Marlon Brando imitation, but he came up with that, and the director, Francis Ford Coppola, loved it so much that he had prosthetic implants made to put into his cheeks, and it created the character, didn't it? Now that is a risky choice. So another chapter in Steal the Show is about raising the stakes. If we want to play big in life, we generally need to play at a high level. Mm-hmm. And when I say play, I'm using that word intentionally because we play roles all the time. We play different roles with our spouses than we do with our parents, than we do with our children, than we do with our friends from high school, than we do with our colleagues. Now, all of these roles are different versions of who we are.
And you would say that's okay. You talk about being a chameleon, that there's nothing wrong with this.
No, a chameleon, when they're on a red leaf, they turn red. When they're on a green leaf, they turn green. But they're not pretending to turn red and green. They actually turn red and green. It's authentic for who they are. So I think the idea of authenticity is often used as a tool to degrade somebody, meaning say, if we don't like who they are, we say, well, they're inauthentic. But you can be well-liked, well-respected, and move in and out of lots of different circles, lots of different scenarios, and play different roles in all those scenarios by amplifying different parts of your personality and quieting down other parts of your personality. But if you think about life, let's take life. Let's dive into the big concept of life. The way that we perform during life's high-stakes situations determines the quality of our life.
Example.
So, well, you asked me, are you ready to shine?
Yes.
Of course. The question is, are you ready to shine when the spotlight is on you? Do you want to step into the spotlight, and do you know what to do when you're there? Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what to do when you're there, are you willing to step in anyway and say, you know what? I can improvise my way through this because I have faith in myself, mm-hmm. that I'm capable of figuring out what to do next. And if I make a big choice that isn't right, that will lead me to another choice that may be closer to what I think is right, because there is really no one way to do anything, is there? So if you think about a job interview,
yeah,
a negotiation, a sales pitch, even meeting your future in-laws for the first time, those are all high-stakes situations. So you are showing up as a performer. And the way you perform during those high-stakes situations determines the quality of your life. So if you fall flat during that negotiation, if you don't know what to do with your body, mm-hmm. if you have trouble controlling your breathing, if your voice is constrained and quiet and you don't sound very confident, it's going to be hard to succeed in that negotiation. The same thing on a job interview. Anytime you're in front of a prospective client, the way that we perform during those situations will determine the quality of our life. And that's why I think about life as a performance, but from an authentic perspective, without abusing that word authenticity or judging people based on what we think is authentic.
If you don't mind sharing, in your Think Big speech, you share a moment of authenticity. We actually share a similarity. Mine was on the other side of the coin of getting extremely controlling on food. I went to the national championships in cycling in 1986, 87, and I dropped 25 pounds before the race and completely wrecked myself because I was so focused on food. Mm-hmm. But if you don't mind sharing, you share in this speech a bit about your story, which then opens up the bond with everybody to you, because everybody has a story.
Yeah, we all have some sort of story that we wish we could hide. And we often spend a lot of time trying to hide it. And when we do that, we tend to muzzle ourselves. And it's hard to be fully self-expressed when you're trying to hide certain parts of yourself. So I was one of those man children. there's always a man child in every class, the guy who's shaving in the 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
I was full grown at 13. It was completely bizarre. But I also liked to eat. And I was pretty good at controlling it throughout my youth. I played sports. I wanted to make sure I looked good because I liked girls. I was able to control it. But as I got older, into my 30s, I started having trouble managing what I ate. And the more I would try to control it, the more out of control I got. And I started to find myself binge eating. Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't throwing up the food. I was just binge eating and keeping it in, and I was gaining weight. And I felt horrible about myself. I was overweight, and I didn't feel comfortable in my body. I didn't want to go on stage and perform because I didn't want to be seen. And when you are standing up in front of any kind of audience or group of people, or even an individual, you cannot hide. You cannot hide on the stage. So I wanted to hide. And there were times where I really did not think I could ever get it under control. Eventually, I did, but I still need to be vigilant. I have to really be very careful. And once I started being honest about it, it got a lot easier to be me in other parts of my life. And I started accepting myself more, I think. And that actually, interestingly enough, helped me be more confident and even more successful in my life because I wasn't afraid of anybody finding out who I really was.
Woo!
Yeah. You mentioned that you've done a lot of work for people with learning disabilities.
Yes.
And I have learning disabilities. I still am dyslexic. And when I was in school, I always felt like I was a little bit behind the other kids. I was very fortunate because my parents were very attuned to the issue, and I went to a progressive private school, but it was a very academically rigorous private school. So my friends would read the textbook and then go get an A. That's it. They didn't even have to write note cards. So I always felt like I was behind them. I always felt a little bit stupid. But I felt capable, which was an interesting feeling. It was this weird dichotomy between...
Fascinating.
Yeah. I feel kind of stupid, and I don't understand sometimes half the time what the teacher's saying. But at the same time, I feel like I can do the things I want to do. Mm-hmm. So over the years, I discovered that because I have a sense of urgency about what I am interested in, I will fight really hard to figure it out. And so I had to create my own protocols for understanding the way the world works. And I mention this because that quote unquote learning disability that I thought I had is actually what makes me successful now, because I've written 6 books. Nobody in high school ever thought that I would write 6 books, let alone be on the New York Times, Wall Street Journal bestseller list. It was just, my high school prophecy was modeling for Tiger Beat magazine. And the first magazine I was ever featured in was Sassy magazine, which is pretty much the same thing. Mm-hmm. So my high school prophecy came true. But I mention this because people who are dyslexic often have trouble in the corporate world for a couple of reasons. Number one, other people's structures are sometimes difficult for them. Yep. And in the corporate world, they often constrain you to fit into their structure. Number two, they often become good verbal communicators, which often leads them into entrepreneurship. Because if you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to excite people about what you're doing in order to create the thing you want to create. They often tend to be very good at getting other people to do their work for them, which is what entrepreneurship is in large part about. Yep. And finally, I think that they're often good at taking disparate ideas and reorganizing them in a way that's easier to consume, which is what I've done in all of my work over the years. I have the ability to take complex concepts, if I've studied them at length, and then reorganize them in a way that's easier to consume so I can consume it. And then as a result, it helps the people I serve who aren't dyslexic, who just, when you look at the way most experts organize information, it's just a big mess because they understand it. But helping other people understand it is a little bit different.
Michael, I'm having so much fun here because you and I both share this. And I grew up with the label ADD. I was taught how to type at 10 on a touch typewriter because I kept reversing my letters. And so I kept on flunking handwriting until I was 10 years old because I was always making them backwards. And even today, if I sign somebody a book, I'm so embarrassed and scared because chances are half the characters are coming out wrong.
Yes.
And so I call us disseminators.
Yeah.
We have an amazing ability to take that information and translate it and give it back to somebody and explain it even better than the original.
That's right. It's exactly right. I have the same fear every time I'm writing a name. I like stare at the name tag.
Yes.
Write a letter, I look up, I write it. I mean, I have so many books that I have in the storage room that I started signing that I ended up with the wrong name or the wrong spelling. I'm like, geez. And it goes into the storage room, and there's like a whole stack of them in there. But, I'll ask my 12-year-old to help with spelling. Sometimes I still have trouble with spelling. So sometimes the things that you think are disadvantages are in fact, or turn out to in fact be advantages if you're the kind of person that is willing to dig deep into your soul and work pretty darn hard.
You expressed something a minute ago that stuck in my mind. Urgency around something you're interested in. And I think this is huge because there's something else you talk about later on, a super objective. And these kind of go hand in hand, that if you have that goal in mind, things open up. They light up for you. And so we really need to allow ourselves to go in that direction.
We sure do. I have a sense of urgency, and I don't know where it comes from. It could just be a personality trait. But when I want to do something, I want to do it. I don't want to wait 6 years. I want to do it. So let's get it done now. Anybody I hire needs to have that sense of urgency. It is a key component to all of the work we do and the way we look at life. Now, hopefully that's different than impatience. Because I have a tendency to be a little bit impatient. My wife argues with me, actually. She says I am very patient, but there's different kinds of patience. So I may be patient in terms of how I listen to, the kids about what they need and deal with them when they're acting up a bit. But when I want something, I'm often impatient about getting it. But if I can translate that in a way that is sensible and allows me to put together plans to achieve that thing and not allow my impatience to be directed at any person, then I can tend to get the things that I want to get.
That makes sense. And you could argue or say that that's just having a fire lit under you or a fire in your belly that won't allow you to be stopped. And that kind of, I really want to understand, but before I let you go, we've got a little bit here, but the think big revolution. And before we jump into that, you talk about something early in your book, why we don't want to be realistic. Because you could be realistic. Take your time.
Yeah. I've never been realistic in my life.
Me either.
Never. I have my feet firmly planted on the ground. There's a big difference between living in a world that's made up and creating the world that you want to live in because you don't buy into anybody's preconceived notions of who you are or are not. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
And this is not it's kind of life-changing, I suppose, but I'm a boater. Boating is my obsession.
Powerboat, sailboat, what are we talking?
Powerboat.
Okay.
So I bought a new boat. It was delivered in March. It's phenomenal.
I've got to ask length. What are we looking at? Motor?
Yeah, it's 60 feet.
Yep.
It has 2 Cummins 600 diesels.
Got it. Okay.
Pod drive system. And it's a French brand called Prestige.
Oh, très bien.
So I love this boat, but we had a problem with one of the props. There's a manufacturer defect in one of the propellers, and it kind of crippled us. But I've got 20 colleagues coming down to the boat this weekend for our summer bash. Many of whom you know, I'm sure. Jordan Harbinger, host of Art of Charm, is coming with his girlfriend. Pam Slim is coming. Derek Halpern is coming. I mean, there's a whole group of people coming. So we planned this 7 months ago. We rented out the whole inn and the farmhouse, And all of a sudden they're telling me my boat is not going to work for 5 weeks. We can't get you another pod in 5 weeks. I said, no. I understand if I hit something, I have to wait. But because you put something on there that didn't work and it fell off, you need to get me one now. And I do it with charm, but strength. And this Friday, they will be installing a new pod. They just had to work a little bit harder to source those parts from different places around the country rather than just waiting for a new one to be delivered from the factory. They did a little bit more work and they got it. So they told me, Michael, just be realistic about this. You're going to have to wait. It's not going to happen this weekend. And I said, no, somebody else might buy into that, but I don't buy into that. I know you can do this, I told them. And guess what? They did. So this is just the boat. This is just the propeller. But I look at most situations in life that way.
You brought something unique to it that you have in your Think Big Revolution talk. You have it in your book as well. I call it What's Love Got to Do with This? You were firm, but you treated them with love. Absolutely.
These folks have to know that the effort that they make is going to be worth it. That it's not just that they're going to get in trouble if they don't. And I could use that. I could say, listen, hey guys, by the way, I'll write an article for Forbes or Inc. Next week about this experience. I'm sure that'll go over really, really well. But I don't need to do that. Would I do that? I don't know. But I don't need to do it because there's other ways of achieving your objective. So in Steal the Show, I talk about super objectives. A super objective is your big overarching objective. And then your sub-objectives are the smaller objectives that, if you accomplish, will allow you to produce your super objective. So the reason I'm bringing in all these acting techniques into the real world for non-actors is because they apply. So what an actor does when they're creating a character is they choose a super objective. And that super objective is something that the actor pursues. And generally the writer writes, if they write a good script, they're introducing a lot of conflict, a lot of obstacles that the character has to overcome. So the actor is able to illustrate this character by fighting through those obstacles to achieve the objective. If I know what you're going after and how you do it, then I know who you are. Because you can tell me anything about yourself, but it doesn't mean anything. Only if I see you go after it and see how you do it, then I know who you are. So that's how you develop a character as an actor. It's not about putting on a limp or a fake nose. All those things are often helpful to illustrate the character, but it's what you go after and how you go after it. So what tactics do you choose to go after it? So same thing in life. I knew exactly what my super objective was, and I literally sat down and I thought about the different tactics I could use to achieve that super objective.
What was the super objective?
To get that boat running by the time everybody arrived on Friday afternoon. And now, here's the thing. It's still got to happen. It's not Friday yet, but they are scheduled to do the work at 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday. Which is pretty darn amazing. It went from 5 weeks to 4.5 days. So just a small example because it just happened. But what I did is I chose my different tactics in advance. And then I was able to improv along the way. So preparation plus improvisation produces the kind of spontaneity that allows you to stay in the moment. And when you stay in the moment, you're able to connect with the people in front of you. You're not living in the past. You're not over anticipating the future, but you're right in the moment because you're prepared and you're willing to improvise.
That sounds like the power of presence.
It's exactly right. The power of presence. That's what performing is about. Interestingly enough, people think that performing is about being fake or phony. To me, performance is not about fake behavior. It's authentic behavior in a manufactured environment. And all of those situations that I mentioned earlier, job interviews, negotiations, sales pitch, meeting your in-laws, first date, those are manufactured environments. They're very strange. They're made up. Giving a speech on a stage in front of an audience who's sitting in chairs, that is a very manufactured environment. So how you perform during those high stakes situations will determine the quality of your life.
Do you mind if I ask, if we go bigger picture here, what is your one thing or your overarching super objective?
Peace. And peace. Now, I would love peace for the world, but my super objective is personal peace, to feel peaceful.
And so I'm saying this to share for the audience's perspective, it means that when you're making decisions, that's in there, isn't it?
Absolutely right. It's, is this decision going to make me feel amped up, anxious, or is it going to make me feel more peaceful? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean I'll shy away from things that make me uncomfortable. You can be uncomfortable and peaceful at the same time. But when I look at my life, out into the future, I want to feel peaceful when I die. And given the way that, given my personality, given the way that I was raised, given the world in which we live in, sometimes it feels like a battle to continue to live in that peaceful way. And there's different ways, again, lots of different tactics you can use to try to find that. And none of them are right. And each one is something worth exploring.
Well, we talked off air briefly that you do meditate, and that's a piece of it. If I understand correctly, I know for myself, I like to say I don't want to die with the music still inside. There's stuff to come out. It sounds like for yourself, a big part of peace comes from that stretch, from that growing, from that reaching for big goals that may not be easy and may not happen, but that's where the living in the peace is for you.
Absolutely. Now, I should, just to clarify, I'm not regularly meditating now. I have done a lot of meditation, in part during my martial arts training, because I was forced to by my teacher, and I begrudgingly did it. Mm-hmm. But I don't do a lot of that kind of meditation. For me, actually, boating is a meditative experience for me, and even the way that I wash the boat, it's all very meditative. So
you know the movie Perfect Storm?
Yes, of course.
My uncle has the sister ship to the Enola Gale. He's been on the most dangerous catch or whatever the TV show is. He's Clark Sandler. He's in Gloucester, Mass. Only one of 3 commercial fishing vessels left there.
Wow.
And when I was home last year, he took me out on his little skiff, and we went through all the marshland of Ipswich and Gloucester. And I've been on boats before in my life, a lot when I was younger, but I am now hooked.
Yes.
And so I'm looking at where we move next in life, which is coming up this year, with a very different eye by what's the water look like around.
Well, there's a book called Blue Mind.
Yes, Wallace J. Nichols. We had him on. He is amazing.
Great. And for those who didn't hear, they should definitely listen to that episode, because he breaks down how being on, near, or in the water influences us physically and psychologically. And it's really quite extraordinary, because most of us have had that experience. Well, when you go to the beach or you walk down on the dock, or you feel like, but there's a reason that happens. Mm-hmm. And it's physiological. And then, of course, influences the way you feel psychologically. So I love what you said. You don't want to die with the music still inside. I do feel like I will, because there's always another note to play.
You're right.
Yes, there's always another note to play. And I imagine that when I'm hopefully, my wife and I got married. It's our second marriage. And we hope we can have another 50 years together, or 55 years. We're 45 and 43 respectively. And I imagine at 95 years old, I'll be fascinated and interested in something. Right now, the thing that I'm reading every single day is personal finance. I'm fascinated with it. I will never sell it. I will never, build courses around it. It's nothing to do with my current work, but
What part excites you the most?
About what you can do to create a future lifestyle today so that you have security then. It's absolutely extraordinary. And here's the other thing that I love. Two things. One, or 3 things, because there's so many. 3. 1, I have discovered that I am capable of learning that stuff. I'm not a math guy. I never really sort of picked up finance. I took, intraday economics, or I took them as macroeconomics, I think. I got a D. It wasn't my thing. And I thought, well, I can't understand what they're talking about half the time. What are these words they're using? Beta and alpha and momentum and value and side. What is this stuff? But I know it now and I can learn it. And that's really empowering. That, I don't need a nice man in a suit to tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. Number two, much of the financial industry is not in service of the individual. It is an industry that is often interested in the growth of the individuals in the industry at the expense of the consumer. And I don't think too many businesses that operate in that way should be in business. So now that I know about what the pitfalls are, I know how to stay out of them. And that's empowering too. And then number three, to see what I'm able to do with my money now and where, it will be. I mean, the future is always unknown, but, given historical data and if the world continues to work in the way that it does, I should be able to retire quite comfortably. And that's a really powerful feeling.
So let's go from there. In the last little bit we have left, are you still focused on a think big revolution, and what are you hoping people understand about the concept of thinking big?
Always. I'm always focused on a think big revolution. I think thinking big about who you are and what you offer the world is revolutionary because it's about change of some kind. And I do not think that big is about scale. Each one of us should decide what thinking big means. For example, I know Donald Trump wrote a book at some point about thinking big or being big or something big. Donald Trump and I are very different. Donald Trump and I do not look at the world in the same way, and we would probably have a very different a conversation about what it means to think big that would not necessarily line up. So he has one way of looking at thinking big. I have another. You might have another. Sandra has another. Phil has another. Each one of us should define what it means for ourselves so we don't go out in the world and think that we need to do things the way other people do them or behave in the way other people behave. Or we say, gosh, I don't want to run a company with 500 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people. I don't want to do that. So that means I can't think big. I just want to do my art, or I just want to be a photographer, or I just want to, be a consultant and have 5 or 10 clients. Well, that could be big for you if you stand in the service of others as you stand in the service of your destiny. Those two things, I think, should be hand in hand.
Can you explain that in a little more detail?
Yeah. Well, if there are some people who are so service-oriented that they forget about themselves, and they go out and they help.
That's not self-love.
That's not self-love. No, they go out and they help others, they help others, they help others, they help others at the expense of themselves. Mm-hmm. There are other people on the other side who do not help others, do not help others, do not help others, do not help others. Everything is for the self. Both of those extremes are destructive. But the balance of I am out there serving others and I'm serving my own dreams at the same time, that's a powerful place to be. That lines up.
Yes. Beautiful. So from there, can you tell us what advice, if you had, would you give to parents today or parents for their kids about looking in the world a different way?
Oh, gosh. Don't tell them they're smart. There have been some interesting studies on this, that kids who are told that they're smart often have trouble growing because they don't know what to do when they run into roadblocks. Because
resilience. Yeah,
you can't get smarter. I'm just smart, or I did but if you learn resilience, if you learn how to have grit, if you learn how to work hard, man, it is such an extraordinary feeling to see your kids work. One of our kids just built a computer. He's 12 years old. He wanted a certain gaming computer. Yep. And of course, we're not going to buy that. We have an allowance system with them that offers bonuses for savings. It's pretty cool. We learned it from a book called The Opposite of Spoiled. The Opposite of Spoiled. And we say to them, listen, we buy all the things you need. If it's a need, we buy it. If it's a want, you buy it. Of course, we give you, Hanukkah presents, Christmas presents. We give you birthday presents, things like that. But the things you want an app, you buy the app. That's all there is to it. So he wanted a computer, but he wanted a really powerful one, and he couldn't afford the powerful one. So he built one. Now, that meant that he had to learn how to build the thing. He had to get help from the local tech guy who owned the computer shop for free. He had to get that guy to give him advice. So he had to be the kind of kid that others would want to help. That's a lesson. So that's the kind of stuff that we're really working on with them. And we hope that it will have a positive impact down the road.
And that is a mighty big woohoo! So from there, a couple quick wrap-up questions we have for all of our guests. First off, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Gosh, there are so many things, but I think a lot of it is feeling that I have done right by my family. I think that is so important. Responsibility. When I feel the pride of taking that responsibility and really owning it, to me, that gives me such a great feeling.
Beautiful. So from there, I love your book. I can't recommend it enough. Steal the Show. If you had seen the, I don't know, it's like 73 questions plus subparts that I actually had for this book. Just get the book, everybody. It's beautiful. Where can people go to find your book, to find out more, and to find your upcoming events?
Sure. So anywhere books are sold, you can find Steal the Show. You can also listen to the podcast, stealtheshow.com. Check out the podcast there. And we also have a website, heroicpublicspeaking.com. heroicpublicspeaking.com. We've got our live events listed there. We've got one coming up in the fall in Fort Lauderdale, big event. And if you ever need anything, just shoot us a question at questions@heroicpublicspeaking.com, questions@heroicpublicspeaking.com.
Beautiful. And if you're driving down the road and you didn't catch it, go over to inspirenationshow.com and we'll get you over to Michael's site as well. Real quick before our last wrap-up question, will you be boating in Fort Lauderdale?
Absolutely. We take the boat down to Florida for the winter. So in November, we drive down from the Chesapeake Bay, we run the boat down, and then we run the boat back up in April.
Absolutely beautiful. So from there, any last words of wisdom that you want to share with people?
Yeah, have a mad, passionate love affair with yourself. And if you do, you'll probably think bigger about who you are and what you are for the world.
Woohoo! So I want to thank you so much for being on the show, Michael. This has been a ton of fun. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, think big, and steal the show, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Wonderful job. And maybe I'll come back and we can do the other 70 questions that we can get to.
I would love and be honored. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!